Hey everybody, welcome to Monday. And as promised, I'm continuing from Friday, responding to the responses to the question, how do we reward, you know, non-alpha dogs, what we referred to as the doormats on Friday. And there were some interesting responses. They all sort of came in a very similar wheelhouse, which is cool when that happens. This video might be a little shorter because I am in earnest editing Boss Fight episode 5 stuff right now, and it is complex. There is a lot of green screen. There is a lot of multiple characters on green screen this time around, and so it is slow and it is tracking a lot of layers, and my brain is in a very different place right now. When I have to do spatial composition stuff, it's like patch cables come out of, one connector in my brain and go to another. And so my language centers suffer. It's really weird. I don't know if anybody else has this problem, but I'm still going to do videos this week. Just if I seem a little, that's why I'm doing a totally different kind of work. And I don't jump from spatial to linguistic super duper well. Like, it's not effortless. I need to get in character, so to speak. So if you like this sort of weirdness, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. And as you see, Slimer's got Canada Day glasses on. I liked that. I don't know why. But the general consensus was that people change behaviors when the benefits to the behaviors outweigh the potential punishments for the behaviors or the potential negatives associated with the behaviors. And, it sounds like a very simple, almost reductive solution, but it does make sense that, for all our complaining about certain elements of society, something is rewarding that behavior or people wouldn't keep doing it. And a couple commenters actually said, like, something that would really help is for women to make the first move. And I thought that was very interesting because I was one of those people back in the day, not sex typical. And my experience was it completely freaked guys out. I learned I had to be more subtle and kind of drop hints instead of going, hey, you want to go out or something? Like, you want to dance? You want to do stuff? Every time I asked a guy to dance, he completely freaked out and told his friends, and then I was publicly shamed in school. Yeah, that happened. Now, I'm not saying all guys would react that way. It could just be the wrong guys. But that, I tell you, that experience really gave me an appreciation for what guys go through as the gender that is expected to make the first move, so to speak. It can be really humiliating and people can be really awful about it. And this is where I hate gender constructs. I hate that, like I hate The Sims. You know how I feel about The Sims. But this idea that men are supposed to do certain things and women are supposed to do certain things instead of people doing things and things being good or things being not good for people, drives me bonkers because I'm not good with guile. I'm not good with hinting. It's not in my nature. I'm not subtle. You may notice. And so, I come at it, I think, from the other side of the same coin as, some of the guys who are commenting on this stuff. And I think, that's because we're all sort of gamers and we all are attracted to this hobby because, one of the things I find games reward for me is non-sex typical behavior. I don't know if that's so for guys because it's in part because guys make games and a lot of guys write women as more masculine behaviors. I don't know. But I just find that my natural inclination of how to handle a situation is more rewarded in video games than it is in real life. And so I really relate to the idea that if we want if you want to encourage different behaviors, we have to reward different behaviors. And I mean, that's a very scary rabbit hole to go down when you consider what kind of behaviors are being rewarded and the fact that those behaviors basically created the whole Me Too movement and the subsequent backlash that men are afraid to be alone with women. And yes, I made a generalization, not all men, obviously, but I've heard from enough people that the safest thing is just to not be there. And I'm like, that really sucks. Like, as somebody who just generally gets along with men better than women, I have one longtime female friend. But most of the female friends I have right now, I've only known for a few years. It's only been in the last little bit that I know we do hashtag weird girls, right? I know other women who I actually get along with, and it's not just friggin' awkward. And so, I'm kind of stuck in this thing of, I understand the judgments. I understand why people assume certain things. Not all men are like that. Not all women are like that. And I know that not all has become an online cliche, and that sucks because it's true. 25% of the population is not sex typical. That's just facts. So we've got an entire 25% of the population that's been left out of gendered assumptions. It's terrible. It's awful. It sucks. And I had hoped that all the discussions about gender nonconformity and, non-binary people, gender fluid people, genderqueer people, all that stuff, I was hoping that would actually ease up on that stuff. But my personal observation is, ever since we created more labels, gender stuff has been more rigid, more oppressive, right? Unless you identify as non-binary and change your pronouns to they, them, you get stuffed in this sex typical box. And, with all due respect, fuck off with that. I shouldn't have to become a linguistic imposition to be myself. I should be able to go, I don't want to think about this shit. I don't identify much with anything, because in order to enforce different pronouns, right, you have to identify very strongly with that. Otherwise, it's not worth the work, right? If you don't, like me, it's just not worth the hassle. It's not worth making people uncomfortable. It's not worth correcting people. It's not worth the grief from your parents, stuff like that, And this is why I really, as much as I don't agree with the guys who say it's just better to avoid women, and I find it highly ironic that they would post that comment on, like, my YouTube channel, I think it's worth listening to, because there's a lot of people who feel that way. And I just think it's, I use the term myopic before. I just think it's myopic to ignore that concern for various reasons, because there is an element of truth to it. Now, of course, the problem with a reduction in mixed gendered professional associations is everybody loses out. You don't get the best ideas if you're cutting off an entire gender, right? You're certainly not going to be able to make inclusive games that a wide variety of people will like if you're not including a wide variety of people in the development process, right? That's why I say that this just just don't have anything to do with women is myopic. There could be women at your company who have really great ideas. And if they're just singled out because, you know, a minority of women do make false accusations, everybody suffers in that. I stand by that. I get it. I get why people say that's the only safe alternative right now. But yeah, it's not good in the long run. So, you know, it's that whole thing of how do we reward different behavior? And I do think that we have to start not just being kind, because people see kindness as like, oh, just be nice, just don't do things to make people uncomfortable. But kindness has to be proactive. Like, it has to be an active thing. You have to actively praise the behavior that you want to see. And I mean, that's the approach I took in the comment sections of my videos, right? The whole idea of Feedback Friday is, well, one, it's a day I don't have to figure out what to talk about. I just read comments and respond to them, right? But it's also that unless you have that feedback system, the praiseworthy comments don't get spotlighted. People tend to just end up fighting with haters instead of going, hey, that idea was really interesting, or that was a really cool way of putting it. I never thought about it this way, like so on and so forth, right? The thing that amazes me is that's not that hard as long as you make a conscientious effort to do it. I don't know why more communities don't do that. Because I find it actually does. And it's funny, it does vastly improve the quality of comments. I got that from a study that found that any sort of like-dislike paradigm creates bad behavior, that even like somebody getting dislike bombed doesn't discourage them. It's a form of reaction. Therefore, it actually encourages bad behavior because, you know, they got noticed. And anything with an approval system, it's apparently just a complete race to the bottom. And I'm like, okay, so how can we do qualitative stuff instead of quantitative stuff? And, you know, there's no shortcut for actively appreciating something someone does. Like, hey, that was really good. Like, actually bothering to praise someone and tell someone they're doing good. You know, I've got a friend of mine, male friend. He's one of my he's one of my PTSD buddies, like Sit Rep Saturday type buddies. But he's come so far in the last couple years. And I just said to him, you know, the other day, you've come so far in, you know, since I've known you. He's tackled some incredibly tough stuff, both with health and self-care, but also just facing, you know, really difficult psychological stuff. And he's taking care of himself and putting himself first in ways that he didn't used to do before, and in ways that are healthy, not selfish, right? And so, you know, I told him, and it was, you know, kind of a moment, but that's the sort of thing you got to do. And my attitude is, he's my friend. I'm going to give him that encouragement. I don't care that, you know, I'm allegedly female and he's male. He's my friend. I'm going to tell him. I'm going to tell him that I'm proud of him. I'm going to tell him that I see the improvements. I'm going to give him that encouragement. And you can't worry too much whether that's going to get weird, whether someone's going to get the wrong idea. You have to make those human connections. You have to be a friend. You have to actively support people. I am more and more convinced that all the depression and all the anxiety and the loneliness epidemic and, incel stuff and all that stuff is just because we don't make those fundamental, really basic human connections. We don't tell people when they're doing something good because we're so afraid of being labeled inappropriate or creepy or gave the wrong idea. Now, I admit it's easier for me because I'm older, and it isn't the same sort of status with a woman in her 40s as, somebody younger. But still, I mean, I did similar things when I was younger, and yeah, some people got the wrong idea, but it was sort of like, whoa, hey, situation check time, let's set boundaries, and things continued. It is possible, but what it really comes down to is you can only do that when you're accountable for your own behavior, when you stop making excuses for shortcuts, and you know yourself well enough to, how do I put this? Pay an honest compliment and have it seem honest. You can't really know firmly what you believe until you know who you are as a person. And I'm not talking about these identity labels, right? No, fuck that. I'm talking about what your morals are, what you stand for, what your goals are, and basically, a very fundamental idea of right and wrong. And I have found that I get along with people better who have firm ideas of their concept of right and wrong. Even if they don't match mine, I can respect somebody with a moral code, with an ethical code, as long as they've got one, and as long as they're consistent, and as long as they adhere to that. It's less important to me that it is exactly identical to mine than basically if I can predict it. If a person is consistent enough for me to go, all right, I can rely on this person to do this, this, and this because, they have this morality, they have these ethics. They may not be the best person to do some of these other things, but, I know I can rely on them for this. And so you can allow people to play to their strengths and play their part instead of, putting someone in a situation that inadvertently is setting them up for failure because you're just not on the same page with certain things, right? And I think, unfortunately, more and more with corporate mandates and, employee handbooks that make people say specific things to customers and things like that, there's no space for people to get to know each other. I mean, in game dev, it's so intense. You get hired for this job. It's like, plunk, you're in it right away. And you're learning people's quirks as you go. There's no rehearsal period. Like, more and more, I miss the process of doing live theater because it was, that sometimes 2 weeks, but more often like 6 weeks of rehearsal where that's where you did all your fucking up. And that's where you did all your blowing off steam and you got to know your castmates. And it was a really, the good kind of collective endeavor. And then you did, the performance, you did whatever the run was, but you had that time to get to know each other and to block and to do timing and to practice. Now you just get thrown in the deep end, like right away. And there's no time to get to know each other. And we wonder why all these breakdowns happen. And I don't know if that's true of other industries, but it does really seem like you're expected to know everything day one. And I think that has something to do with it. But I also think just that I don't know the word for it. Some people would call it entitlement, but I don't know if that's quite it. I think that people judge their own inherent worth by the behavior of others. And there are these myths we tell people about what reactions give you worth that are actually quite toxic. You know, it's the Twilight the novels thing where Bella's so sure she knows Edward would never be interested in her nose, right? Knows. No, she doesn't. She suspects, she doesn't know because it turns out she's dead wrong, right? But this idea that a guy is just going to wear down a woman's self-esteem issues is kind of the dominant paradigm. There's a reason that Twilight was so freaking popular, right? That forces guys to break boundaries. And in the current paradigm, no guy is going to do that. Now, I'll tell you that the fear from the other side with women is that you get taken for granted if you're the person that's always making the first move. And this is male or female, mostly. And so it's this idea that it's always one way, like one partner is just constantly praise bombing the other instead of it being like a two-way street. I'd love to see more depictions in media that were not like that. You know, I'd love to see more partnerships of equals, both friendship and, you know, romantically, instead of it being the main character and the other character just being this steadfast support and confident. If they're not, they're a bitch. You know, I would love to see more communication modeled. I would love to see more healthy relationship behavior modeled in media. So much of the stuff in media is so dysfunctional. And, you know, how do we expect young people to form good social habits when they're getting their cues from CW shows? You know? It's just there's no hope for humanity if we do that. So I know I've asked this before, but it seems to be reasserted. If you don't like the current paradigms, if you don't like everybody being afraid of each other, if you don't want things to be this way, if you want women to be able to be on an equal playing field with men in the workplace because men aren't hiding from women because they don't want to get falsely accused, lift other people up. As a couple commenters pointed out, kindness has to be like rational self-interest, rational selfishness, right? Like, people can't be altruistic all of the time, get absolutely nothing back for the things they do for other people, right? So pay someone an honest compliment. Tell someone when they're doing well. Let someone know that they're appreciated. Because, you know, you really don't know how much that could mean to someone. Oftentimes it means a lot because, you know what? At least I know in terms of positive feedback versus negative feedback, it's incredibly skewed to the negative. And you end up just getting such a shell around you that nothing gets in. None of the positives, none of the negatives. It's just like, you know, that effect when like a flashbang grenade goes off and it's this sort of like whine and there's no other sound. That's pretty much what it's like, right? You're interacting with feedback. You're going, oh, all right, but nothing. It's a numbness. It's just a dead zone because you can't let anything in Because if you let, it's hard to let one thing in and not let everything in. And the shittiness and the perviness and, all that stuff is just so overwhelming that you end up not appreciating the positive feedback because you're just so overwhelmed with crap. And, the negativity is not going to go away until the negativity stops getting results. And that's why I agree with the people who are like, don't bow your head to the culture war. I get why people say that, because it encourages the negativity instead of people who are more like, I really like this, not so much this, but I really like this part. Those are people I listen to. When people can say something they like about my work, I am more likely to pay attention to the stuff that they don't like so much, as opposed to someone who's just constantly negative. Because if someone's just constantly negative, it could just be they're negative. It could just be they hate me, and no matter what I do, they'll never be satisfied. So why try to appease them? It makes no sense, right? So, I mean, this seems very amorphous. I recognize. Be more positive is like, oh, geez, rah, 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 right? I do think we can make a dent, though. Like, even if we can make each other's lives less shitty, that's something, right? At least there's this space where people can go and not have to overthink everything and not always be on their guard, right? That's all we can really control, and maybe we can hope that it just sort of pays forward into other areas. This kind of stuff does become habit if you do it long enough. It feels less weird. You feel less afraid of rejection. Because I have had to be like, I give them a compliment. I tell them something positive, and they go, who the fuck are you? Fuck off. And it's like, well, okay, I tried. First couple times, like, yay. It gets easier. And I mean, I think the other thing is we need to be a little more patient with people and be less prone to dismissing people as creepy. But I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Let me know. I'll try to find some gaming news for tomorrow, but I thought this was interesting enough to respond to. Okay? Okay. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. My brain is tired. Thanks for watching.